Hello, my name is Hillary, and this is my lounge. Welcome to Hillary's Whiskey Lounge. Today I'm going to give you a very quick course in how whiskey is made, more specifically Scottish single malt whiskey, also known as Uskeva or aqua vitae, the water of life, that it's been called for so many centuries. And I'm also going to be featuring a weird object of the day from my lounge. So if you want to hang on till the end of my video, you can see what that weird object of the day is, weird object of the video. So we're going to start very quickly with how Scotch is made. Scotch starts off as the grain barley, not oat, not rye, but barley. And the barley is grown in Scotland. If you've ever heard Sting's song Fields of Gold, I believe that it's about the barley that's grown in Scotland. There are some distilleries that grow their own barley, and so they don't have to go far to get theirs. A lot of barley it's kept, tight records are kept from where the barley is grown, so the distillers know exactly what field even the barley was grown in. The barley is collected and it's taken to the distilleries and it's put in basically these big troughs of water. And what that's doing is it's allowing the dried barley grains we are tricking them into thinking that it's time to germinate. And what happens within the little capsule of the barley grain is an important chemical reaction. I'm not going to go into the names. And what that little chemical reaction does is actually produce a little bit of sugar. And so the little barley grains don't continue to grow, and they're just allowed to grow a teeny tiny little root. And so the barley grains are, after they're tricked into thinking that it's time to germinate, then they're dried. So time to dry those barley grains. And the way that's done is traditionally hot air from fires are blown over the barley grains that are spread out on a floor to dry them out. So no more chemical reactions can keep happening, and so the barley doesn't actually germinate. So it's spread over a big wide floor. Traditionally, men with these big rakes would be raking the barley into nice consistent layers, and hot air would be pushed over or from underneath the barley to dry it out. Sometimes that hot air is created from peat, which is a compound grown or it just happens. It's decomposing earth that's been earth and plant life and so forth. Lots of organic matter that's been decomposing for years and years and years. And the Scots used to take that peat, which is sort of like a very thick, compacted clay. They would dig it up into these long bars and dry those bars out. Sometimes I guess it would take months to a year to dry each bar of peat out. And the Scots would use this to heat their homes and also to produce that fire to dry the barley. And it's that peat, that smoke, that is still used today that imparts the smoky, quote, peaty flavor to some of the whiskey that we're going to be trying. But otherwise, if you don't want that peaty smoke, then that peaty flavor, then you just use hot air from either regular fires or hot air blowers. So the formerly germinating wet grains are now dry. The men with the rakes would consistently turn those rows and rows of barley on the floor over, so the drying process was nice and consistent. Once the barley is dried, then it's ground into a specific size, and there are really some very cool old-fashioned methods for making sure that the ground barley is at the perfect consistency. If it's too finely crushed, it just basically becomes sugar and mush and flour when it's mixed up with the water. If it's not ground enough, then not enough sugar will come out. The sugar is key. Also, things like rocks, stones, pebbles, and other impurities are taken out of that finely, almost finely ground barley. That ground barley then is mixed up with water in these huge multi-gallon vats, and the water is added to that, and it's mixed up, and that's called the wort, and the worts. So the water and the ground barley so far are the only ingredients that we have. And then over time, when the water and ground barley are mixed together well enough, then they're transferred over into another big, huge container called a washback, and yeast is added. And there's this nice arm that goes around and just does a wonderful job consistently mixing the yeast and the water and the barley. Those are the only ingredients really that's supposed to be in single malt Scotch. Just the crushed barley, the water, and a yeast. And it's the yeast that can also impart different effects onto the final product. So the wash now, the wash is being, it's almost like a beer consistency. If you go into a distillery, it smells like bread baking and it smells like beer brewing. It's a wonderful smell. And if you look into the wash, you can see these big bubbles forming. And this is actually the yeast eating the sugars. And the yeast is what's key now. And the yeast is converting those sugars into alcohol. That's where these big bubbles are coming from. The wash is it takes several hours to sometimes days to get that right form of how much alcohol is in that wash. Then the wash is actually taken into these great big huge copper stills, and you've probably seen these where they have these big bellies and then very fine stems and then these necks, and it's the distilling with the heat. The heat is going to be boiling and making the alcohols rise first before the water can rise into these long necks. And it's into these long necks where the alcohol vapor is then cooled and then is taken into one collector. That collector then is sent to another still. So usually Scotch whiskey is distilled 3 times, where Irish whiskey is, or sorry, the Scotch whiskey is distilled twice. I'm being distracted by my dog here. Come here. Come here. Okay. So the Scotch whiskey is distilled twice. And then finally, once it's distilled that second time, then it's collected, taken into barrels. And these are either American oak former bourbon barrels, or other kinds of whiskey barrels, and then those have to age in the barrels for at least 3 years for this amazing Ushkava, water of life, to be aged well enough to be turned into whiskey. It's that first pure distillate is drinkable, but it really it tastes more like kind of like a very sharp, harsh gin, and the alcohol level is very, very high as well. So then the whiskey is being aged in these barrels for at least 3 years. And so when you see that, for instance, when you go to the store and you buy a whiskey that's aged 10 years, that's how long it's been in a barrel. It might be aged in a bourbon barrel. It might be actually aged in a sherry barrel. That's going to impart a lot of beautiful, deep, rich sherry flavors, very fruity, very deep, rich colors. Sometimes the whiskey is then transferred into different kinds of barrels, and that's called finishing. So there's a little difference between aging and finishing, but we'll get into those later. And then finally, and so if you buy a bottle of whiskey that says 12 years aged or 10 years aged, it doesn't matter if then after that's been bottled, how long that's been sitting in the bottle. It doesn't matter if the bottle itself has been, the whiskey's been poured in there and it's been sitting there on the shelves for 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. If it says it's been aged for 10 years, that's referring to how many years it's been in the barrel, not how long the whiskey's been sitting in a bottle. Once the whiskey's finished aging in the barrel, that's done with the aging. And then the final step is, of course, then to bottle. There are some distilleries that do their own barley. They do their own grain. They do their own grinding. They do their own distilling, and they do their own bottling. And that's kind of a rare thing these days. There are a lot of distilleries that import their barley from other places in Scotland, and it comes on these big ships. There are some places that do the malting, and the malting is what is called when the barley when it gets wet and when it grows that little stem, that little root, and it gets the sugars. So sometimes maltings take place at other distilleries. Some distilleries do their own malting. They do, hi Hallie, they do everything themselves. So I want to show you actually what barley looks like. It's this nice fine grain. You might think that it's a grass or an American wheat, but this is what barley looks like. When it's steeped and turned into a soup, I'm sure that you've seen barley stew, but in my opinion, this is the best. This is the best use of barley there is. So that's a basic crash course in how whiskey is made. So again, the barley, it's malted, the sugars form, it's dried, it's ground. It's put into different vats. One of the vats is just water steeping and getting the sugars out of the barley. The other step is adding the yeast, and then then the next step is the stilling over the great big copper pot stills, and then pouring into the barrels, letting that age for several years, at least 3 years, to be called Scotch single malt whiskey, and then finally the bottling. And it's in those barrels where all the flavor, all the color, even though it is legal in Scotland to add this little caramel coloring to whiskey, but not all whiskeys have that caramel coloring. And then the final step is the bottling, and then we get to drink it. Yes. So thank you for watching my video this far. I want to show you my weird object of the day. This isn't actually too weird of an object. It's just a thing that I recommend that if you're starting off in the world of whiskey that you drink. This is Aeneas MacDonald's book just called Whiskey. And this is the sort of beginner's Bible to not just how whiskey is made, but the philosophy of whiskey, the history of whiskey. And then when Aeneas MacDonald, who's actually an alias for, I forget who, he wrote this book in 1930. So you know what was going on in the United States in 1930. That's when Prohibition was happening. And I don't remember if he mentions that or not. But this is a nice little book. As you can see, it's tiny. And this will give you a really good place to first land if you're trying to understand not just how whiskey is made, but the whole philosophy behind it and the thought process and just the feelings imparted by the drinking and the appreciation of whiskey. So thank you very much for continuing on our whiskey journey with me. And I would really appreciate it if you would like this video and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends if your friends are also interested on going on a whiskey journey with you and me. Thank you so much and have a great day.